Welcome to Dr. Conjuring's bone-chilling horror stories, where the terror feels too real to be fiction. Before we dive into tonight's story, make sure to grab your headphones. Trust me, you'll want the full experience. These stories are designed to be felt, not just heard, and the darkness is best experienced with your eyes closed. We don't always need a screen to frighten you. Sometimes it's just the sound that creeps under your skin. So sit back, close your eyes, and let the horror take hold. It was a cold October night, the kind where the chill seeps into your bones and refuses to let go. The clock on the wall read 11:37 p.m., and the wind howled like a restless spirit outside the old farmhouse. The trees creaked and groaned under the weight of the autumn wind, their skeletal branches tapping against the windows. Inside, Emma sat curled up on the worn leather couch, her eyes glued to the flickering television screen. A half-empty mug of hot chocolate sat on the coffee table. The house had always felt too big when she was alone. Its long hallways and countless rooms seemed to breathe in the dark, whispering secrets to anyone who dared to listen. Her parents were out of town for the weekend, and despite being 19 and perfectly capable of handling herself, Emma couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that clung to her like a second skin. The floorboards creaked above her, the sound so sudden and distinct that she froze. Her heart raced as she stared up at the ceiling, her breath catching in her throat. Probably just the house settling, she whispered to herself, trying to dismiss the noise. But deep down, she knew better. The old farmhouse was well past the point of settling. Emma grabbed her phone from the couch cushion and opened the flashlight app. The beam of light cut through the darkness as she made her way toward the staircase. Each step creaked under her weight, echoing through the silent house. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she reached the top of the stairs. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling. Silence. The hallway stretched out before her, lined with closed doors. The faint smell of cedar wood lingered in the air, a remnant of her father's handiwork from when he had renovated the house. Emma's heart thudded in her chest as she walked toward the guest bedroom at the far end of the hall. The door was ajar, swinging slightly with each gust of wind that rattled the house. She hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. The room was empty, just as it should be. The neatly made bed and dust-free surfaces were a testament to her mother's meticulous cleaning habits. Emma let out a shaky breath and laughed nervously. "Get a grip," she muttered to herself. But as she turned to leave, she caught sight of something in the corner of her eye. The closet door was cracked open, just enough for darkness to seep through. Her stomach tightened. She knew she had closed that door earlier in the day. She always did. Taking a deep breath, Emma steeled herself and reached for the closet door handle. The metal was cold against her skin. Slowly, she pulled the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The closet was empty, except for a few old coats hanging limply on their hangers. She let out a relieved sigh and shook her head. "Paranoid much?" she muttered as she closed the door firmly. But as she turned to leave the room, a sudden noise stopped her in her tracks, a faint tapping sound coming from downstairs. It was rhythmic and deliberate, like someone knocking on a window. Her pulse quickened. "Just the wind," she told herself, but her feet were already moving, carrying her back down the hallway and toward the staircase. The living room was dark. The television screen was now black. Emma's heart raced as she scanned the room. The tapping had stopped, but the uneasy feeling remained. She crept toward the window and peered out into the night. The yard was empty, bathed in the pale light of the moon. The wind rustled the leaves, and the old swing set creaked as it swayed back and forth. Emma frowned. There was no sign of anyone or anything that could have made the noise. As she turned away from the window, a shadow flickered in her peripheral vision. Her breath hitched as she whipped her head back around, but there was nothing there. "Emma, get a grip," she whispered to herself. But as she turned back toward the staircase, she froze. Standing at the foot of the stairs was a figure. It was tall and thin, its face obscured by shadows. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs as she stumbled backward, her legs threatening to give out beneath her. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The figure didn't respond. It simply stood there, motionless. Emma's mind raced. The front door was just a few steps away. She could make a run for it. But something inside her kept her rooted to the spot. A primal fear that told her turning her back on the figure would be a mistake. The figure took a step forward, the floorboards groaning under its weight. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps as she backed toward the kitchen. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice cracking. Silence. Another step forward. Emma's hand found the kitchen counter, and she fumbled for a weapon, anything to defend herself. Her fingers closed around a heavy cast-iron skillet. The figure moved closer, its footsteps slow and deliberate. Emma gripped the skillet tightly, her knuckles turning white. "Stay back!" she screamed. But the figure didn't stop. It reached the edge of the kitchen, its presence suffocating. Desperation took over. Emma swung the skillet with all her strength, its weight sending shockwaves up her arms. The figure crumpled to the ground, motionless. Emma stood there, panting, the skillet still clutched in her trembling hands. Her heart raced as she stared down at the figure. But then it happened. The figure's body began to twitch, its limbs jerking unnaturally. Emma's breath caught in her throat as it slowly rose to its feet, its head lolling to the side at an unnatural angle. Panic surged through her. She turned and ran for the front door, yanking it open and sprinting out into the night. The cold air bit at her skin as she fled down the driveway, her bare feet slapping against the pavement. Up ahead, the forest thickened into a wall of blackness. Emma's pulse thudded in her ears as she stumbled forward, her breath ragged and uneven. Her lungs burned and her legs felt like lead, but the primal instinct to survive pushed her forward. The shadows stretched around her, swallowing every trace of moonlight. Her desperate gaze scanned for an escape, but the trees loomed closer, bending toward her as if the forest itself had turned hostile. Then came the whisper again, low, guttural, and inhuman.
"Emma!"
Her knees buckled, and she fell to the damp, leaf-strewn ground. The whisper clung to the air, twisting into a mocking hum. She clawed at the earth, dirt caking under her fingernails as she tried to push herself up. But something cold and oppressive weighed her down, wrapping around her body like invisible chains. The sound of leaves crunching behind her sent icy tendrils of terror through her spine. She didn't dare look back. But she didn't have to. A cold breath brushed the back of her neck, foul and ancient, carrying the stench of decay. Her chest seized as an overwhelming sense of dread washed over her. The forest was dead silent, as though every living thing was holding its breath, watching. A shiver coursed through her as bony fingers, impossibly long and sharp, curled around her shoulder. Emma screamed, thrashing wildly, but the grip tightened, dragging her backward across the forest floor. "No, let me go!" she shrieked, her voice raw with terror. The figure loomed over her now, a twisted mass of shadows and glistening darkness that defied reason. Its form flickered, shifting between solid and ethereal, as though it straddled the line between worlds. Emma's breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to kick free, but her body felt numb, paralyzed by the unnatural cold radiating from the creature. Her mind screamed for escape, but her muscles refused to obey. The figure knelt, its face, or the void where a face should have been, mere inches from hers. The smell of rot filled her nostrils, making her gag.
"You will stay,"
it whispered, the words burrowing into her skull like shards of ice. Emma's throat constricted as an invisible force clamped around her neck. Her vision blurred, stars dancing at the edges as she struggled for air. Her hands clawed at her throat, desperate to break free, but there was nothing to grab, just crushing emptiness. The figure watched, impassive, as her body writhed beneath it. Her lungs screamed for oxygen. The world tilted, darkening at the edges. A wet, gurgling sound escaped her lips as her strength waned. Her thoughts fragmented flashes of her childhood home, the warmth of her mother's embrace, the laughter of friends long gone. Then even those slipped away. The cold crept deeper, seeping into her bones until she felt nothing at all. As her eyes rolled back, the forest blurred into an endless void, twisting and writhing like a living nightmare. The figure's voice echoed one last time, soft yet merciless.
You belong to me now.
Emma's body went still, her final breath stolen by the darkness. Silence returned to the forest, thick and suffocating. The trees stood witness, unmoved, as the shadows swallowed her whole. The search party did find Emma, but they wished they hadn't. Her body was sprawled across the forest floor, twisted as though she'd fought against something unseen. Her fingers were clenched, caked with dirt and blood from clawing at the ground, but it was her face that froze them in their tracks. Mouth agape in a final soundless scream, eyes wide and glassy, filled with sheer, unimaginable terror. The rescuers stood in stunned silence, their breaths shallow as a cold dread swept over them. One man dropped to his knees, unable to look any longer. Another backed away, shaking his head as though trying to convince himself this wasn't real. "I've never seen anything like this," one whispered hoarsely, his voice trembling. The horror of her expression clung to their minds, sending shivers down their spines even as the midday sun broke through the trees. It was as though Emma had witnessed something beyond human comprehension, a terror so profound it had followed her into death, etching itself onto her very flesh. There were no wounds, no signs of violence, no trace of what had claimed her life. The only mark left behind was the inexplicable fear etched into her face, a grotesque reminder of something dark lurking in the forest. The investigation yielded nothing. No predator, no human suspect, nothing to explain the horror that had unfolded. Her death remained an unsolved mystery, whispered about in hushed tones by the townsfolk. Those who had found her never spoke of it openly, but their haunted eyes told the tale, and none of them ever returned to that part of the woods again. They said the woods were cursed, haunted by something that never let go. And on quiet nights, if you listened closely, you could still hear it, the faint echo of a scream that chilled them to the bone. That was tonight's chilling tale from Dr. Conjuring's channel. If it sent shivers down your spine, please give us a like. It's completely free and helps us share these eerie stories with more brave souls like you. And if you're craving even more bone-chilling horror that will haunt your nights, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You'll never miss a new upload, each story more terrifying than the last, delivered straight to your inbox. Thank you so much for listening. We truly appreciate every one of you. Good night, and remember, sleep with one eye open. You never know what might be watching. Ha ha.